On Christmas morning, the old ranch was supposed to be silent. Instead, a desperate horse was kicking violently against the barn doors. And again, the sound echoed across the snow-covered valley long before sunrise, startling every animal on Cedar Creek Ranch. Inside the barn, the horse refused to calm down. He wasn't frightened by wolves. He wasn't reacting to the winter storm. He was trying to wake someone. By the time the ranch owner forced the frozen barn doors open, he found the old gelding standing protectively over something wrapped in a faded red blanket. It wasn't hay. It wasn't a lost puppy. It was a newborn foal, shivering in the freezing cold. Resting gently on top of the blanket was a handwritten note. Only 4 heartbreaking words were written across the paper. "Please love her." Those words would begin a Christmas mystery that had remained hidden for nearly 20 years. And before the holiday ended, one lonely rancher would discover that the tiny foal wasn't the greatest gift left in his barn that morning. Snow continued falling softly across the ranch as Daniel Harper knelt beside the tiny foal. She couldn't have been more than a few hours old. Her soft golden coat was still damp from birth, and her legs trembled too hard to support her weight. She let out a weak little whinny that barely rose above the wind. Daniel immediately wrapped his heavy winter coat around her. "Easy, little one. You're safe now." The old bay gelding standing over the foal finally relaxed. His name was Jasper. At 24 years old, Jasper had spent nearly his entire life beside Daniel. Faithful, gentle. Never once had he panicked like this. Yet somehow, he had known the foal was there before anyone else. Almost as though he had been waiting beside her all night. Daniel carefully unfolded the note. The handwriting shook as if written by someone freezing in the cold. "If you're reading this, I'm sorry. I have no one else. Please love her." No name. No explanation. Nothing else. Daniel looked around the barn. Fresh hoofprints. Smaller boot prints leading inside. But only one set leading back out into the snow. Whoever had left the foal had walked away alone. His chest tightened. Christmas had never been easy. 5 years earlier, his wife Hannah had died just days before Christmas after a long illness. Since then, the ranch had felt quieter every December. Neighbors invited Daniel to holiday dinners. He always declined. The decorated farmhouse remained mostly dark. Even the Christmas tree in the living room stayed packed away in the attic. He simply couldn't bring himself to celebrate anymore. Until today. Dr. Emily Carter, the town veterinarian, arrived within 30 minutes despite the snowstorm. She immediately examined the tiny foal. "She's cold, but she's stronger than she looks." Emily smiled gently. Whoever delivered her here knew exactly where to leave her. Daniel glanced toward Jasper. He found her. Emily looked at the old gelding. He probably saved her life. As they warmed the foal with blankets and bottles, Jasper refused to leave her side. Every few minutes he gently touched noses with the little filly. Whenever she became frightened, she calmed immediately. Emily noticed. "That's unusual. He's acting like..." She paused. "Like he's known her forever." Daniel searched every nearby ranch before noon. Nobody reported a missing foal. No pregnant maras had disappeared. Animal control knew nothing. Even the sheriff had no missing livestock reports. The mystery only deepened. Meanwhile, the tiny filly surprised everyone. Despite her difficult start, she quickly found enough strength to stand. Her first shaky steps ended exactly where Jasper stood. She leaned gently against the old gelding. He lowered his head and softly breathed across her face. Daniel smiled for the first time in months. "Looks like you've chosen your grandfather." Later that afternoon, while cleaning the blanket the foal had been wrapped in, Daniel noticed something stitched into one corner. Tiny embroidered initials. Nothing else. Not a ranch brand. Not a company logo. Just 2 carefully sewn letters. Emily frowned. Those initials might belong to her owner. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. Or her mother. Outside, snow continued falling. Fresh tracks leading away from the barn had nearly disappeared beneath drifting snow. But Jasper suddenly became restless again. He walked to the barn entrance. Stared toward the woods. then gave one long, low whinny. Daniel stepped outside. "What is it, boy?" Jasper pawed the snow once. Then again, refusing to come back inside. Emily looked toward the forest. "Do you think whoever left her might still be out there?" Daniel didn't answer. He grabbed his flashlight. If someone walked away in this weather, they may not have made it very far. Within minutes, Daniel saddled Jasper despite the old horse's age. Emily followed on her own mare. Together they rode slowly into the snow-covered pine forest, following what little remained of the fading footprints. The trail grew harder to see with every passing minute. Branches sagged beneath fresh snow. The temperature dropped even lower. The wind became stronger. Nearly 2 miles from the ranch, Jasper suddenly stopped. His ears shot forward. He refused to move. Instead, he turned sharply toward a narrow clearing Daniel had never noticed before. Half buried beneath snow lay an old wooden sleigh, broken, abandoned, and beside it, a single wool mitten, child-sized, fresh. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. This wasn't here long. Jasper pulled gently toward the clearing, then let out another desperate whinny. This time, a faint sound answered, not from another horse, from a human, barely audible. A cry for help hidden beneath the howling Christmas wind. Daniel kicked Jasper forward. What they were about to discover beneath the snow would reveal why the mysterious foal had been left behind, and why someone had trusted a lonely rancher they'd never even met. Daniel urged Jasper forward without hesitation. The old gelding seemed to know exactly where the sound had come from, carefully picking his way through the deep snow as if following an invisible trail. Emily stayed close behind on her mare, scanning the white landscape with growing concern. The wind howled between the pine trees. There it was again. A faint cry. Not loud, not clear, but unmistakably human. "Over there!" Emily shouted, pointing toward a cluster of snow-covered evergreens. Jasper changed direction instantly. As they rounded the trees, Daniel spotted what looked like a mound of snow beside a fallen log. For a terrifying second, he thought it was just another drift. Then the mound moved. A gloved hand slowly reached upward before collapsing back into the snow. Daniel jumped from Jasper before the horse had even stopped. "It's okay," he called. "We're here." He brushed away the snow as quickly as he could. Beneath it lay a young woman, no older than 25, unconscious and shivering violently. Her coat was torn, her boots soaked, and one ankle was badly swollen. Emily knelt immediately. "She's alive, but she's severely hypothermic." Daniel noticed something else. The young woman's arms were wrapped tightly around nothing, as though she had been carrying something precious. His heart sank. She carried the foal. Emily nodded quietly. "And after leaving her safely at your barn?" She tried to walk away. Working together, they carefully wrapped the woman in blankets and lifted her onto Emily's mare while Daniel led Jasper back toward the ranch. The entire ride home, Jasper repeatedly looked over his shoulder, making sure the stranger was still behind him. It almost felt protective. Back at the farmhouse, they placed the young woman near the fireplace. Emily checked her pulse again. "She's lucky. Another 30 minutes in that storm." She didn't finish the sentence. Daniel understood. Hours passed. Outside, Christmas morning slowly became Christmas afternoon. The little foal rested peacefully in a bed of fresh straw beside Jasper. Every few minutes the old gelding softly nickered to reassure her. Daniel couldn't stop watching them. The bond between the two horses was growing stronger by the hour. Almost unnatural. Near sunset, the young woman finally stirred. Her eyes fluttered open. She looked around in confusion. Then panic filled her face. "My baby!" She tried to sit up. "The foal!" Daniel stepped forward quickly. "She's safe." The young woman froze. Tears instantly filled her eyes. "You found her?" Daniel smiled gently. "No. Jasper did." Emily helped the woman drink some warm tea before asking softly, "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Claire." "And my foal? Is she really all right?" Daniel nodded. "Come see for yourself." Claire slowly walked into the barn, still weak from the cold. The moment she saw the tiny filly, she burst into tears. The foal immediately recognized her voice. Despite barely being able to walk, the little filly stumbled across the straw toward Claire. Claire knelt carefully. "Oh, Grace. I thought I'd never see you again." Daniel smiled. "So her name is Grace?" Claire nodded. "It means undeserved gift." As emotional as the reunion was, something unexpected happened. Grace only stayed with Claire for a few seconds. Then she turned and walked straight back to Jasper, resting against the old gelding once more. Claire stared in surprise. "I've never seen anything like that." Emily smiled. "Neither have we." Later that evening, after sharing a warm Christmas meal together, Claire finally explained everything. She had inherited a small mountain farm from her grandfather. It wasn't much, just a few acres, one old barn, and a beautiful wild mare named Lily who had wandered onto the property years before and never truly left. Claire cared for Lily through harsh winters and difficult seasons. Eventually, the mare trusted her enough to stay nearby. When Lily gave birth to Grace just 2 nights before Christmas, Claire thought life was finally changing for the better. Then disaster struck. A powerful winter flash flood swept through the mountain valley. The frightened wild mare disappeared into the forest. Claire searched desperately, calling, waiting, praying, but Lily never returned. Food became scarce. The roads closed. Claire had almost no money left. She realized she couldn't keep a newborn foal alive alone. Then she remembered hearing stories about Cedar Creek Ranch, about a kind rancher who rescued abandoned horses, about an old horse named Jasper who accepted every frightened animal that arrived. She had never met Daniel, but hope gave her one final chance. "I walked all night," Claire whispered. "I knew if Grace stayed with me, she'd die. So I left her where she'd have a chance." Daniel quietly unfolded the note. "You wrote this?" Claire nodded. "I couldn't think of anything else." Silence filled the room. Then Daniel asked gently, "Why didn't you knock?" Claire looked toward the fire. "I didn't think I deserved to." Daniel's heart broke. The next morning, Christmas snow sparkled beneath bright sunshine. For the first time in years, the ranch felt alive. Grace raced clumsily around the pasture. Jasper followed patiently. Claire laughed for the first time since arriving. Even Daniel found himself smiling without realizing it. But their peace didn't last long. Dakota, Daniel's neighbor's horse, who had wandered over to visit, suddenly lifted his head toward the northern ridge. Jasper did the same. Both horses stared into the forest. Completely still. Grace froze beside them. A powerful whinny echoed across the valley. Not close, but unmistakably familiar. Claire's face turned pale. "No," she whispered. "It can't be." Before anyone could react, Jasper trotted toward the gate. Grace followed. Daniel looked at Claire. "Who is that?" Tears streamed down her face. "That's Lily. My mare." "But if she's here..." Claire's voice trembled. Something must be terribly wrong. Without another word, Jasper broke into a steady gallop toward the snowy woods, with Grace racing behind him. Daniel and Claire mounted their horses and followed as fast as they could, unaware that the wild mare wasn't alone. Someone else was following her through the forest, and their intentions were anything but kind. Jasper had never run that fast in years. Snow flew beneath his hooves as the old gelding charged toward the forest, his breath rising in thick clouds against the icy morning air. Behind him, little Grace struggled to keep up, her tiny legs sinking into the fresh snow with every leap. "Grace!" Claire called desperately, but the newborn filly refused to stop. She trusted Jasper completely. Daniel urged his horse forward. "We have to stay with them." Emily followed close behind, her medical bag bouncing against the saddle. Whatever had drawn Jasper into the forest, it was urgent. The distant whinny echoed again. Powerful, filled with desperation. Claire immediately recognized it. "It's Lily. I know that's her." Tears filled her eyes. "She's calling for Grace." After nearly 15 minutes of riding through deep snow, Jasper suddenly slowed. The trees opened into a frozen meadow surrounded by towering pines. Everything became silent. Standing on the opposite side of the clearing was a magnificent wild mare, dark chestnut. Her winter coat shimmered beneath the pale Christmas sunlight. Despite being thinner than Claire remembered, she carried herself with incredible dignity. It was Lily. The moment Grace saw her, she let out the sweetest little whinny Daniel had ever heard. The wild mare answered immediately. She began trotting forward, then broke into a full gallop. Claire covered her mouth with both hands. Lily. Mother and daughter met in the middle of the snowy meadow. Grace pressed herself against Lily's chest, while the mare gently groomed the tiny filly's neck with loving nuzzles. Everyone watching felt tears forming. Even Emily quietly smiled. It's a Christmas miracle. But Jasper wasn't watching the reunion. The old gelding kept staring toward the tree line. His ears flattened. His muscles tightened. He gave a deep warning snort. Daniel noticed instantly. Something's wrong. A branch snapped somewhere beyond the pines. Then another. Heavy footsteps. Human. Not animal. 3 men emerged from the forest. Each carried ropes and tranquilizer equipment. Behind them stood a large horse trailer. Claire's smile disappeared. No. She whispered. They found her. The tallest man stepped forward. There she is. He looked directly at Lily. We've been tracking that mare for weeks. Daniel positioned his horse between the strangers and the wild mare. What do you want? The man smiled coldly. She's valuable. Rare bloodline. Our employer wants her captured. Claire shook with anger. She's not yours. The man shrugged. Wild horses don't belong to anyone. He signaled the others. Move in. The 2 assistants spread out slowly. Ropes ready, trying to surround Lily. The wild mare stepped backward protectively. Grace instinctively hid beneath her mother. Jasper suddenly walked forward. Not aggressively. Confidently. He stood directly between the men and Lily. The old gelding lowered his head. His eyes never left the strangers. One of the men laughed. Move the old horse. He reached for Jasper's halter. Big mistake. Jasper stamped one powerful hoof into the frozen ground. The sharp crack echoed across the meadow. The man jumped backward immediately. Daniel smiled slightly. He's warning you. The leader's patience disappeared. Fine. He raised his tranquilizer rifle. We'll do this the easy way. Before he could aim, a loud whistle echoed across the valley. Every horse froze, including Lily. Then something unbelievable happened. From every direction, wild horses appeared. First 5, then 10, then 20. A complete herd emerged silently from the forest. Mars, young colts, powerful stallions. They surrounded the clearing, not attacking, simply standing, watching. The capture team slowly realized they were badly outnumbered. Emily whispered, I've never seen a herd organize like this. The largest black stallion stepped forward. He positioned himself beside Lily. Then another stallion joined him. Soon the entire front line consisted of powerful wild horses standing shoulder to shoulder. The men looked nervous. We should leave. One whispered. The leader hesitated. We're not leaving empty-handed. He fired the tranquilizer dart. Everyone gasped. But the dart never reached Lily. Jasper moved first. The old gelding lunged sideways, knocking the rifle upward. The dart missed completely. It disappeared harmlessly into a tree. Daniel couldn't believe what he'd just seen. At 24 years old, Jasper had protected Lily without hesitation. The loud noise startled the wild herd. The black stallion let out a thunderous scream. Instantly, the herd surged forward, not charging to attack, charging to protect. The capture team panicked. They dropped ropes and equipment before running toward their truck. Within seconds, they sped away through the snow without looking back. Silence returned. Only the horses remained. Claire rushed toward Lily. This time, the wild mare didn't retreat. Instead, she gently lowered her head into Claire's waiting hands. Months of patience. Years of trust. And now, complete acceptance. Daniel quietly looked toward Jasper. The old gelding stood breathing heavily. His legs trembled slightly from the effort. Emily immediately walked over. Her smile faded. "Daniel?" She gently examined Jasper's front leg. "I think he strained a tendon." Daniel knelt beside his oldest friend. "You saved them." Jasper softly touched Daniel's shoulder, as if saying it had all been worth it. While the others celebrated the reunion, Daniel noticed something strange near the abandoned capture equipment. One leather folder had fallen into the snow. Inside were photographs and paperwork. Every page focused on one horse. Not Lily. Not Grace. Jasper. Daniel stared in disbelief. There were pictures of Jasper taken years ago. Race records. Auction documents. Old ownership papers. One faded photograph showed Jasper as a young horse standing beside another bay gelding that looked almost identical. Written on the back were 5 shocking words. "Brothers separated at birth." Daniel's heart pounded. Jasper had never had any known family. Yet someone had been searching for him. For years. Before Daniel could say a word, a black SUV slowly appeared at the edge of the snowy road. An elderly man stepped out. The moment he saw Jasper, tears filled his eyes. Then he whispered, "I finally found you." The snowy meadow fell silent once again. Only the gentle sound of the wind moving through the pine trees broke the stillness. The elderly man stood beside the black SUV, his eyes locked on Jasper. For several long moments, he couldn't move. Neither could Daniel. Jasper lifted his head slowly. The old gelding studied the stranger with quiet curiosity. Something unexpected happened. Jasper let out a soft, low nicker. Not a warning. Not fear. Recognition. The elderly man's knees nearly gave way. He removed his weathered cowboy hat and pressed it against his chest. "I knew." His voice cracked. "I knew you were still alive." Daniel stepped protectively beside Jasper. "Who are you?" The man took a deep breath. "My name is William Brooks. I've been looking for this horse for 19 years. Daniel frowned. 19 years. William nodded. He wasn't always called Jasper. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" William slowly reached into his coat pocket and removed an old leather wallet. Inside was a faded photograph. 2 young bay colts stood side by side in a green pasture. Identical white stars on their foreheads. Identical kind eyes. One wore a blue halter. The other wore red. William handed the picture to Daniel. They were twins. Daniel stared at Jasper. Then back at the photograph. There was no denying it. The horse beside Jasper looked almost exactly the same. "When they were only 6 months old," William continued, "our breeding ranch went bankrupt. The bank auctioned every horse. The brothers were sold to different buyers. I bought one back." He smiled sadly. "But I never found the other." William looked directly at Jasper. "I promised their mother I'd bring them together again." Emily quietly whispered, "My goodness." Daniel gently rubbed Jasper's neck. "You never knew." William nodded. "I searched auctions. Rescue centers. Private ranches. I followed rumors for nearly 2 decades. I almost gave up." Claire looked confused. "But how did you find him now?" William smiled faintly. "The men who tried to capture Lily weren't working for me. I've spent years tracking wild horse smugglers. When they mentioned seeing an old bay gelding protecting a wild mare." He looked toward Jasper. "I had a feeling." Daniel relaxed slightly. "So you're not here to take him?" William immediately shook his head. "No. Not unless he chooses to leave." The old rancher slowly walked toward Jasper. He stopped several feet away, giving the horse space, respect, patience. Jasper watched him quietly. He took 3 slow steps forward. William held out his hand. Jasper gently touched it with his nose. The elderly man closed his eyes. A single tear rolled down his cheek. "I've waited 19 Christmases for that." Even Daniel couldn't hold back his emotions. Back at Cedar Creek Ranch, everyone gathered around the fireplace as snow continued falling outside. The farmhouse, once silent every Christmas, was now filled with laughter. Emily prepared dinner. Claire decorated the small tree Daniel hadn't unpacked in 5 years. Grace slept peacefully in fresh straw beside Jasper. Lily remained just outside the barn, choosing to stay close instead of returning immediately to the mountains. Felt like family. After dinner, William opened an old wooden box he had carried in his truck. Inside were dozens of photographs, letters, horse ribbons, newspaper clippings, and one tiny silver horseshoe. This belonged to Jasper's mother. He carefully placed it into Daniel's hands. I think she'd want him to have it. Daniel turned the little horseshoe over. Something had been engraved inside. 3 simple words. Always find home. Claire smiled through tears. I think he already has. Later that evening, William showed Daniel another document. It was an old property map. One corner was circled in red. My family once owned this valley. Daniel looked closer. The circled land bordered Cedar Creek Ranch. Most of it had been abandoned for decades. William sighed. I've decided to donate it. Daniel looked up. Donate? To create a permanent sanctuary. For rescued horses. For wild mares like Lily. For foals like Grace. He smiled warmly. And if you'll accept, I'd like you to run it. Daniel couldn't speak. Only weeks earlier he had been struggling just to keep his ranch alive. Now, someone was offering him the opportunity to protect horses for generations. Before he could answer, Jasper suddenly lifted his head. His ears pointed toward the barn. Grace had begun crying. Everyone rushed outside. The little foal stood nervously near the stable entrance, looking toward the dark woods. Lily was already there, completely still. Watching. Daniel whispered, "What is it now?" Then they heard it. A horse. Running hard through the snow. Not one. Several. Moments later, 3 frightened young wild horses burst into the ranch clearing. They were exhausted, terrified, and covered in fresh cuts. Behind them, far in the distance, came the unmistakable sound of snowmobiles. Someone was chasing them. Daniel's expression hardened. They're back. William nodded grimly. But this time, he looked at everyone gathered beside him. They picked the wrong ranch. The old barn lights glowed warmly against the Christmas snow as Jasper stepped forward to shield the frightened young horses. The battle to protect them was only beginning. The sound of the snowmobiles grew louder with every passing second. Their engines echoed through the frozen valley, shattering the peaceful silence of Christmas night. 3 frightened young wild horses stumbled into the ranch yard, their coats streaked with blood from cuts left by branches and barbed wire. They were exhausted, trembling, and barely able to stay on their feet. Without hesitation, Jasper walked in front of them. The old gelding was no longer the strongest horse on the ranch. He was no longer the fastest. But every animal behind him seemed to believe one thing. If Jasper stood his ground, they were safe. Daniel quickly closed the main ranch gate. Emily, get the injured horses into the south barn. She nodded immediately. Claire, help me. The 2 women gently guided the frightened young horses inside, speaking softly to keep them calm. Grace stayed close to Lily, copying every movement of her mother. The tiny filly seemed to understand that something dangerous was happening. William looked toward the approaching headlights. There are 4 snowmobiles. Daniel frowned. They're after the wild herd. William nodded. Those men won't stop unless someone stops them. Within moments, the machines rolled to a halt outside the ranch entrance. The same leader Daniel had seen earlier stepped off his snowmobile. His expression was colder than before. You've caused us enough trouble. He looked toward the barn. The horses belong to us now. Daniel crossed his arms. No. They belong to themselves. The man laughed. Move aside. Instead, Jasper stepped forward. The old gelding stood directly between the strangers and the barn. Lily joined him. Then another ranch horse. Then another. Within seconds, every horse on Cedar Creek Ranch formed a living wall across the snowy yard. Domestic horses. Wild horses. Old horses. Young horses. Standing together. Even Grace, though tiny and barely days old, stepped beside Jasper. Claire smiled through tears. Look at her. She's not afraid anymore. The leader reached for a tranquilizer rifle again. But before he could raise it, red and blue lights flashed across the snow. Sheriff Tom Henderson arrived with 2 patrol trucks. Behind them came 3 wildlife officers. William smiled quietly. I made one phone call while we were driving back. The sheriff climbed out. His voice was firm. Drop the weapon. The man hesitated. The wildlife officers immediately stepped forward. One officer held a folder. We've been investigating illegal wild horse trafficking for nearly 2 years. He looked directly at the group. You're under arrest. The men tried to run. They didn't get far. Within minutes, they were handcuffed and placed into patrol vehicles. As the trucks drove away, silence returned to the ranch. For the first time since Christmas morning, no one was afraid. Emily finished treating the rescued young horses. They'll recover. She smiled. Thanks to everyone here. The next morning, Christmas sunlight spilled across Cedar Creek Ranch. Fresh snow sparkled like diamonds. Smoke drifted peacefully from the farmhouse chimney. For the first time in years, Daniel didn't wake to loneliness. He woke to laughter. Grace raced clumsily around the pasture, chasing snowflakes with playful energy. Jasper followed behind at his own slow pace, watching over her like a proud grandfather. Whenever she stumbled, he gently nudged her back onto her feet. Lily stayed nearby. She no longer kept her distance from humans. Instead, she trusted Daniel enough to stand quietly while he checked her injuries. Claire looked around the ranch and smiled. I never imagined Christmas could feel like this. Daniel nodded. Neither did I. Later that afternoon, the entire town gathered at Cedar Creek Ranch after hearing the incredible story. Neighbors brought homemade pies, warm bread, blankets, and decorations. Children laughed as Grace chased them through the snow. The little filly quickly became everyone's favorite Christmas guest. During the celebration, William stood before the crowd with the old property map. I have an announcement. Everyone became quiet. My family has officially donated 600 acres surrounding Cedar Creek Ranch. Soft murmurs spread through the crowd. William continued. The land will become the Christmas Hope Horse Sanctuary. A place where abandoned horses, injured wild animals, orphaned foals, and struggling families could always find safety. And he smiled toward Daniel. I've asked Daniel Harper to become its first caretaker. The crowd erupted into applause. Daniel stood speechless. Only a day earlier, he had believed he would spend another Christmas alone. Now, he had been given something far greater than land. He had been given a purpose again. Over the following months, volunteers helped build new barns, veterinary shelters, riding trails, and rescue paddocks. Emily became the sanctuary's full-time veterinarian. Claire accepted a position caring for orphaned foals while continuing to visit Lily, who remained free to roam between the sanctuary and the surrounding wilderness. The wild herd came and went as they pleased, knowing the ranch was always a safe place. Grace grew into a beautiful young filly. Curious, brave, gentle. She inherited her mother's spirit and Jasper's kindness. Visitors often laughed as she followed Jasper everywhere, copying everything he did. One warm spring morning, Daniel found Jasper standing beneath the old oak tree overlooking the valley. The elderly gelding watched the sanctuary below. Foals running freely. Families smiling. Children learning to care for horses. The place was alive. Exactly as it should be. Daniel walked beside him. You did all this, old friend. Jasper turned his head slowly and rested it against Daniel's shoulder. Just like he had done through every difficult year. Months later, when Jasper peacefully passed away from old age, the entire town gathered beneath that same oak tree. They didn't mourn only the loss of a horse. They celebrated the life of one who had rescued countless others. A simple wooden sign was placed beside his favorite pasture. Jasper, the horse who always found the ones who needed home. Every Christmas after that, families from across the country visited the sanctuary. Many brought rescued horses. Others came simply to hear the story of the tiny foal left in a barn with a note that changed everything. The original note was framed inside the sanctuary office. Its faded words remained unchanged. Please love her. Daniel often looked at it before greeting new arrivals. Then he would smile and quietly say, "We will." If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes in the incredible bond between humans and horses. Every share helps more people discover stories of hope, compassion, and second chances. Because sometimes the greatest Christmas miracle isn't the gift you receive, it's the life you choose to save.